Good afternoon. My name is Mike Korcek. I'm the Sports Information Director Emeritus at Northern Illinois University. Welcome to the Barcema Alumni and Visitor Center. This is another in a series of DeKalb oral history projects produced by Jim Barker. Today's guest is former Northern Illinois University head football coach Joe Novak. Including his playing days at Mentor High School in Ohio and at Miami University, Coach Novak has been actively involved in the game for almost half a century and has succeeded at every level. At last count, he has been enshrined in 5 Halls of Fame. He won MAC and Region Coach of the Year honors, coached numerous All-Americas, academic All-Americas, NFL performers, and a national rushing champion. Joe coached 16 seasons at NIU, 4 as defensive coordinator under Bill Mallory and 12 as head coach. Named head man in December 1995, Coach Joe lifted the program from the depths of the major college ranks to national prominence. He is well known for his work ethic, integrity, perseverance, and sense of humor. Welcome back, Joe.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. Good to be here.
Good to see you. Well, I'm gonna give you two numbers. I want to see if you're in your Husky mode. 19 to 16.
Alabama.
I knew it. I knew it. That's the final score of the Alabama game. Okay. All right, we're ready to roll then. Okay. You know, I read someplace where you were in junior high and you got caught writing X's and O's in your notebook. How did this coaching thing start? Your dad wasn't a coach.
My dad had a 6th grade education, Mike. That's as far as he got to school, but he was a big influence on me because he was a straightforward, honest man who didn't push me into sports, but really did encourage me very much so. As a kid, we lived in Mentor, Ohio, which is about 25 miles east of Cleveland, a suburb. It's now the largest high school in the state of Ohio. But back when I was there, it was the country. People came from the city out to the country. And all my buddies that lived around me, we all had probably 2-3 acres of land with our houses. Really? So we all had a baseball field on our property. We all had basketball hoops, and that's all we did all year round. We played sports. Mike, I hate to admit this, but I slept with my sports equipment. My baseball bat, my glove, my basketball, they were in bed with me at night. As corny as that is, I mean, I just love sports. And I got going, and I used to play dice games on the table by myself, sports-oriented, basketball, stats, and I kept numbers. And that, I was a math teacher too, so sports and math to me, and baseball statistics now, are still something that intrigued me. And it was just a natural thing. And I can remember as a kid, like you said, I remember drawing plays in a notebook, X's and O's, and not really sure how that got started, but it was something I was always, I always loved sports. It's something I wanted to do, and I figured if I didn't want to work for a living, I could coach, and that's what I did.
I remember when we did the interview with George Bork, and I said, George, who was your favorite, athlete when you were growing up? And for a nationally ranked passer, he said Johnny Unitas. So, who were some of your heroes, and was there a coach in there early in your life?
Well, when it came to baseball, I was a big Cleveland Indian fan and still am. Rocky Colavito was my guy. And I love Rocky. They traded him for Harvey Keene, and I'll never forgive him for that. But Rocky Colavito certainly is a baseball player. But all the coaches that I was around, Mike, had a great influence on me. My high school coaches, Earl Biederman in football, Gene Spurrier in basketball, Dave Enderle in baseball, all had a big impact. And Earl, who was my football coach, steered me to Miami. And then, of course, at Miami, I played with Bo Schembechler and was a GA for Bo, and that was a tremendous experience. And then in high school for 6 years, I worked with some great high school coaches, Dick Strom, Jim Hillis, who ended up being the head coach for a year at Wisconsin. And then, of course, after that, I worked for Dick Crum and Gary Moeller, and then, of course, Bill Mallory. And we'll talk, I'm sure, more about Bill later.
Right. Did you ever get caught? Did the teacher ever catch you writing?
I think they had given up on me, Mike. They didn't care, but they knew I was hopeless, and they let me go. But I don't remember ever getting caught, no. And all the plays worked. They all went for touchdowns. They all went for touchdowns.
Did you keep them 40 years later?
No, I wish I had.
I think you told me you wanted to be Woody Held. Is that Third base. Third base.
You're good if you remember what he held. I wanted to play third base for the Indians or the Tigers. And I don't know why Tigers, I guess because they were close. But I wanted to be a Major League Baseball player. That's what I wanted to do.
So was 54 your dream season as an Indian fan?
It wasn't. It wasn't until the World Series, and they got
Series.
swept in the series.
But that was the year they won 111.
Yeah. 48, they won the series.
Right.
But I was 3 years old, so I don't remember that. I remember some of the names, but I don't remember that. 54, I was just crushed because they won 111 games that year and then got swept in the series by the Giants. Dusty Rhodes.
Yep. I just forgot what I was going to ask you. This is really good. What aspect of coaching, though? I mean, okay, you loved athletics. You were a three-sport guy at Mentor. But what aspect of coaching intrigued you to think you wanted to do it at that stage?
Oh, I think a couple things, Mike. You know, I'd like to think I was a smart player. I mean, a student of the game. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the reasons I was able to play, because I wasn't terribly talented. I wasn't big, strong, and fast. And when you're not that, it's hard to be a player. But I think I was coachable. I was smart. And I studied the game. I enjoyed that part of it. I did as I was coached to the T. And like I said, that was the reason I was able to play. But I was always intrigued with the finer points of the game. And like I said, I realized at a young age that I was not going to be a pro athlete. So my way to stay in the game was to coach. And like I said, I had great influences that directed me that way. And I'm so glad they did. I got to live my dream, Mike, for 40 years and retired at it. And I don't think a lot of people get to do that. And I'm so happy that I did that. And I had a great life. I really did.
So now with Mitch Trubisky going to the Bears, are your mentors number 2 football player?
I think I'm still a little bit ahead of Mitch. I think he's got. We'll see what he does with the Bears. He might catch me, but no, he was. I got to see him play on TV a few times. Well, he was a great player.
Did Coach Biederman take you to Miami games?
Not to games. We were 5 hours from Oxford, so that was a little too far to go to games. But he was a great Miami alum. He loved Miami and talked it up to us and encouraged us to visit there. And, you know, when I had the opportunity to go, along with their great reputation as the cradle of coaches, Mike, that was a no-brainer for me. That's where it was a dream school for me.
How did you do this? Do you make a mental note? There are some people who make a notebook and they go, when I become a head coach, I'm going to run this, I'm going to do this. And you are the sum of many parts that you just mentioned. I mean, I think if I recall correctly, from your Miami coach, Bo Schembechler, before he went to Michigan, you picked up those who stay will be champions. And I think that's one of the first things you did in our locker room. But I mean, how to handle kids, how, you know, there are so many things that coaches do that people don't see. So did you make a mental list? And again, you were an assistant for a long time.
I didn't purposely make a list, Mike, but I did remember all those things. I mean, I really did. I tried to take the things that I thought were really good. I certainly, the biggest part of me as a coach was Bill Mallory, because I was with Bill for 16 years. And you know Bill, I mean, he was such a large presence, and Bill just did things right. He did things the way you were supposed to do them, and between he and Ellie, they were great mentors for Carol and I. But overall, I took bits and pieces from everybody I was around. A lot of my work ethic comes from Jim Hillis. I mentioned his name before, who I worked with in Warren, Ohio in high school, and Jim was a head coach there. And like I said, later went on to Ball State, and he was with Dave McClain when Dave passed away, and was a head coach for a year. And I learned a lot of football from Jim Hillis. So a little bit here, a little bit there, a lot from Bill Mallory.
Now, your first job as an assistant coach was with Dick Crum at Miami. And Bill went to Colorado. So, but obviously you both played at Miami. How well did you know Bill, and how did you hook up in 1980?
Good question. I knew Bill a little bit. Bill was 10 years older than I was. So Bill was there and gone by the time I went to Miami. I knew of Bill, certainly. He was in the coaching profession and doing very well. And then when Bill left to go to Colorado, even before that actually, when I was coaching high school in Warren, we always had players that were getting recruited. We had a great program there, and a few others. We had some good players. And we always had one or two that Miami recruited. So on the weekends, I would drive them down to Oxford, spend the weekend down there while they recruited that athlete, and then drive them home. So every year I got to see Bill for a short period of time, and we knew each other, but not well at all. But then when Bill left Miami to go to Colorado, Dick Crum, who was his defensive coordinator, got the head job at Miami and hired me. So I heard a lot of Bill Mallory stories over the next 3 years working for Dick, and was aware of Bill. And then I went to Illinois for 3 years, and in 1979 we got fired. I was looking for a job, and Bill had just taken a job here after sitting out a year after Colorado.
Right.
He called me, and again, we knew each other vaguely, and he called me, and I was coaching in the Big Ten, so I think to him I was appealing to and had recruited this area some. So he offered me a job, and I jumped at it, and I'm so glad I did.
Well, I guess while we're on that subject, and Bill sadly passed away earlier this year, within 40 minutes, what impact did Bill have on you in Northern and Miami and the MAC? I mean, he's a giant.
He's a giant, Mike. And like I say, you know, I'm prejudiced, but I'm trying to be objective too when I think about him and talk about him. He is a giant. And I think a little bit underappreciated, to be honest with you. You know, he's one of only 2 coaches, he and Lou Holtz, to take 4 teams and win bowl games at 4 different schools. Every program he was at got better. He did things at Indiana that weren't done before and haven't been done since. Bill is a great football coach. He had some tough jobs. Yeah, when we came in here, Northern wasn't bad. Pat Culpepper, these kids knew how to work. This wasn't a tough job, not a tough rebuilding job. But Indiana sure was. You know, Colorado, he had to turn that thing around. And he's just underappreciated. I know I was on the board of trustees my last few years in coaching, and I tried like the devil to get him to consider Bill for the College Football Hall of Fame, where I really believe he belongs. I think it's a real injustice. And he's not in there because his winning percentage is not 60% or better, which is part of their criteria. And that, to me, you know, if you're coaching at Southern Cal and Notre Dame and Ohio State, you know, those are different. Bill had hard jobs. He had hard jobs, and like I said, I just think, as you put it, I think a giant in a profession is a great term, and there's no doubt in my mind he's a College Hall of Fame football coach.
And not to criticize the National Football Foundation and the College Football Hall of Fame. I mean, they were good to us with George Bork and Tom Beck, but it's just like they're not taking the context that Bill worked in, and you know, 3 of the 4 schools he was a head coach at, and one of them is my alma mater, we're not traditional football powers. No. And so it's really kind of sad.
You know what's interesting too about Bill, Mike, is, and you probably know this, maybe you're going to bring it up later, but he did it the right way. I mean, cheating or in fudging, you know, we're not in part of his vocabulary. It was this way. And you know that, you were around him. There's no maybe gray area. It's like this, and it's done the right way. And you know the other thing, Mike, that I don't think I can't say this either, he never fired a football coach. He never fired a football coach.
Didn't realize that.
He would, you know, if somebody was having an issue, that he would work with them. But if he hired them, he had them. They were his. He never fired a football. You find me another guy that can say that.
Loyalty, lost trait. Like you, Bill was a MAC guy. What did Bill think of the MAC? I mean, you know, cradle of coaches, so many names come from the MAC. And then when you hear these sports guys, you know, well, the MAC's a lousy league and everything else. It's mid-level, but all these people, you know, Woody Hayes, Sid Gilman, I mean, it's amazing.
It's a great league, Mike. And it's a league that is being successful on very limited funds. You know, you compare a Northern Illinois or a Miami or a Bowling Green or a Toledo to Ohio State and Michigan. I mean, we're not even in the same universe with them financially. And to compete, and you know, you're not going to beat a school like that every week, but to compete with a Power 5 conference like the MAC has, it's done the right way. Very seldom has a school in the MAC ever been on probation. There's been a couple, but not very many at all. It's a clean league, it's competitive, it's even. And a lot of guys like myself, and I think Bill would have said the same thing, well, you know, I wasn't a Big Ten player, But darn it, I was able to play in the MAC. It was a great league. It was competitive. While we were there, we beat some Big Ten teams. I love the Mid-American Conference. I'm a part of it, and I'm so glad I went to Miami. So glad I coached at Northern in Miami, and I'm very, very proud of the Mid-American Conference.
Good. Mid-American has its problems, but I think we learned our lesson, when we in the mid-'80s.
We could go on that if you wanted to.
Well, no, we could talk about it later. Jerry Pettibone and I have talked about it. They go 9-2, have a great team,
Yeah.
Stacy Robinson, and they don't get a sniff.
Yeah.
So it's tough. At what point in your tenure, and not that you were looking, when did you realize that, this job at Northern Illinois, this has potential, being the only MAC school in Illinois, Chicago, 9 million people or whatever, east of here. What point did you realize that, wow, if I ever had the opportunity, did that come up maybe during the Cal Bowl year with all the success?
No, came up when we first came here. Bill Mallory hit me on that hard, and I didn't know a lot about Northern Illinois when I came here in 1980, but Bill and I talked about it a lot during that time, and then after we left and went to Indiana, we were always following Northern and what was going on here. But Bill said it at the time. He says, this can be a great job. He says, and it starts with Chicago in your backyard, and with the people. You got a recruiting base right there. You don't have to go anywhere else. And he said, this can be a great job if the people at the university want it to be. There's got to be the commitment from the university, but it's got so much more potential than 98% of the schools, just because, again, of that recruiting base. And I think in the last 20 years, we found out that it is a darn good job in a place that can be very, very successful if the commitment is there.
Would you call this one of the best, if not the best, jobs in the MAC?
Oh, I think it certainly is. And I hate to say this, but Toledo's a pretty good job, too. Okay. And the advantage Toledo has is the city of Toledo.
It's so large.
They got money there. They got so many things right there that's focused just on Toledo. Chicago's not focused on Northern Illinois like we wish it was, but Toledo is. So Toledo's a good job. And they have been successful, but Northern certainly ranks right up there between, with those two.
It's an honest answer. That's what I expected. From the start of your coaching career, you kind of made a game plan to be external. I think one of the first people that, Howard Fletcher always liked you. He said, God, Joe's going to be a good one. And you went after George Bork, maybe the most recognizable names. Tom Lemming, the recruiting guy. So you would tell Tom, hey, Tom, we're going to be the new Northern Illinois. We're going to recruit in the Chicago area. And then, you were involved with the start of the Brigham event, which has morphed into the Brigham Novak golf outing. But was this part of a conscious plan that I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that?
I think this, and Bill was the same way too as I was, but I've always believed this, Mike. I love tradition. I love tradition. As a young kid, I looked hard at West Point, possibility going to West Point because of the discipline and the tradition. That just always really excited me. And I think when you take a coaching job at the collegiate level, the first thing you do is you look back and who are the players? Who are the great players? Who are the football alums? Those are the first guy you cultivate. And how do you come to Northern Illinois and not cultivate a George Bork? When you think of Northern, that's the first name that pops out of everybody's mouth, and should. And on top of that, he's such a wonderful man. He and his wife Merlin are such a great couple. What a great representative for this university. And I just really felt that we needed to engage George Borks and all the ex-players, and that was the reason for the golf outing. I wanted to get the ex-players back. And, of course, that thing is going on, its 23rd or 22nd year now.
That's one of the reasons you're here.
Exactly. And it's been a great success, and I look forward to seeing those guys, and it's a great time every year.
Is this an extension? I think you and I think Bill mentioned it. Woody Hayes' book, You Win with People. Is that kind of a...
I suppose you could say that. I don't think consciously. Woody Hayes was another name that had some influence on me. I can't tell you that I knew Woody well. I met him a few times. He recruited some of our athletes, but if you were in the state of Ohio, if you love football, which people in Ohio do, and I wanted to coach, I mean, Woody Hayes certainly had an influence. Of course, a lot of the guys I work for, you know, Bill Mallory was a Woody Hayes man. Gary Moeller, who I worked for, was a Woody Hayes man. Dick Crum worked for Bill Mallory. Bill was a Woody. So, I mean, there was a lot of Woody Hayes intermixed in everything in my background.
I don't know, I tried putting your basic coaching philosophy into 6 words, and I came up with run the ball and stop the run. Is that fair? Is that accurate?
Yeah, and I think the biggest reason, Mike, is that's what I know, or that's what I knew. You know, every place I'd ever always been, it was you start with running the ball. Back with Bo, and when we were in high school coaching, we ran the ball unless we had to throw it, and that's the way we grew up. And I coached on defense, so my biggest thing was stopping the run. So I always believed you had to coach things that you knew. And there's so much in football, you don't know everything that's going on. I couldn't coach a spread offense now, and if I tried to, I'd be a big failure. Because you're a teacher, Mike. And if I tried to teach English, I'd be a big failure. Now, I taught math okay, but that's something I knew. And I always believed you coach what you know. And just because somebody's hot doing this thing over here, if you don't know it, don't go trying to coach it. Because, again, you're a teacher, and you're not going to do a very good job of it.
No, you have always been selfless. I think in 2003, you said something like, we run the East Coast defense as opposed to the people on the West Coast who were throwing the ball all over the lot. So
let me just say, the reason that I get a kick out of these guys with all these fads and all these schemes. Coaching has changed, and I'm getting off on a little tangent here a little bit, Mike. Young coaches, I've gone away from basics and fundamentals to teach schemes. And you know what? That's more exciting, coaching schemes. But we don't tackle very well anymore. We don't block near as good as we do. We don't run routes near as good. We used to teach less, and I think taught it better. We taught fundamentals. Gotcha. God, when you were with a guy like Bo Schema, the first thing you did is you got into a stance. I don't think they even bother with stances anymore. You know, you always started at step 1 with Bill Mallory. Every year as a staff, we sat down, Mike, and read through and taught the whole notebook as a coaching staff. We would take a whole week, starting at 7 in the morning till 5 every afternoon before the season started, and went through our defensive notebook together, coached each other, taught each other. Bill say, okay, Joe, get up there and teach us how you're going to teach tackling. Every year, Mike. I got to the point I didn't like it, but it was the right thing. We coached fundamentals.
I get it. I get it. You know, all coaches are optimistic, and, you know, particularly when you get a head job, and your press conference was a relief when we hired you finally in '95. But when you were standing there and you kind of knew what you had taken over, could you ever envision that, you know, 7 or 8 years later that we're 12th in the country and 10th in the BCS? You know, every coach envisions winning a championship or going to a bowl game, but that was kind of like going above that for that 7 or 8 weeks, and it didn't finish, but it still was an amazing run. Did you ever envision that?
No. I wish I could tell you I did. No, Mike. I had dreams of competing for championships here. I thought we could do that realistically. I knew we had some work to do, but I thought, you know, potential, as I said before, that we could compete for Mid-American Conference championships and maybe knock off a Wisconsin or an Iowa or somebody sometime. But to have that run, that was just so unbelievable. And you were a big part of it too, Mike, so you remember. It just went so fast. I mean, you beat Alabama, you turn around, you got to play another one. And then you got Iowa. It was a blur, really. But no, that was never a dream. And just living it for the short period of time we did was a lot of fun. And it's certainly a great memory now.
This might be a loaded one, but I think, and you've touched on it a little bit, but, you know, when you look at the modern history of Northern Illinois football, and of course, okay, you've got the Cal Bowl year in '83, then you have 2003 when you had, you know, I think that was the first time that a Mid-American school had ever beaten 3 BCS, and both Maryland and Alabama were nationally ranked, and then you throw Iowa State in there. And then you have a little afterwards when they went to the Orange Bowl in 2012, 2013. So did that ultimately demonstrate the potential of Northern, or maybe it's create unexpected, unrealistic expectations?
Good question. And I think a little bit of both, Mike. I think obviously it did. It showed what could occur here. But to think we're going to the Orange Bowl every year, to think we're going to beat Alabama and Maryland and Iowa State in a year, every year, that isn't going to happen. I think Rod Carey and the success they've had against the Big Ten has been phenomenal. You know, the success we had, we never beat a Big Ten team. And yet, people at times are complaining about, you know, this and that. But again, I think to answer your question, a little bit of both. Like I said, it showed the potential here, but it's not going to be like that every year.
Not to get you rising out of the chair, we did beat Wisconsin.
No, you did. That's right.
No, you did, and those silly penalties at the end, the phantom penalties.
Well,
that's probably one that still makes you hot.
Yeah.
So, you know, one of the, I don't know, downsides of your program's success was you had so many assistant coaches poached away. Was it like 36?
Yeah.
So was that a reflection, a good reflection on the program, or kind of a pain in the butt to you, though I got to hire new assistants? But it also showed that, hey, this young man from Northern Illinois, I want to hire him. So how did you feel about that?
Good question, Mike. And I was lucky when I first started here. I had a nice pool of young coaches. A lot of them were graduate assistants, or I got to know through Indiana and Bill Mallory and that. But you know, I had a nice pool, and I started, and we hired. But two things. We made a lot of mistakes when I was here. You know, I'll be the first to admit that. But one of the things we did well is we hired good coaches. I was very fortunate that way. I made a few mistakes, but we hired some awful good coaches. When we started to have success here, those guys got more attractive, and rightfully so. So we went through 36 coaches when I was here. A lot of them are still coaching, doing very well. 3 are head coaches, or were. Scott Schaefer, Narduzzi, and PJ, of course. I got 3 or 4 guys in the NFL. I mean, we had some, people need to understand that. We had some very, very talented assistant coaches here during my time.
And it's hard to keep them because at the mid-level major, you can't pay them what the big boys or the NFL.
And that's their aspiration. And I encouraged them. If the right job came along, I told them they had to go. That was the thing. And like I said, luckily I had some people to turn to then. And when I started to run out short on my pool, I had some good friends in coaching that would recommend people to me. And knock on wood, for the most part, they did a great job of doing that. And I was very fortunate in the coaches we had here.
Okay, what aspect, and this one we could probably do a 3-hour session, what aspect of the Maryland game in 2003 still sticks in your mind, whether it's Michael Turner in the paper in the morning in USA Today, which made you happy, you know, the sellout, the scalpers, we turned 500 people away, I mean, 28,000 people, and the way we won the game in OT. What's the first thing you remember of the Maryland game?
People have probably heard this story. They're probably sick of it, but I know I've told it a bunch of times. You talked about expectations when I came. I had a dream when I came here. And I honestly wasn't sure if it would ever come about. I figured it probably wouldn't, but I did have a dream. And it was 4 things. It was talking about having a nationally ranked opponent come into Husky Stadium, national television, you know, a Husky win, and a sellout. And I remember before the game, somebody came up. I was sitting up in the office underneath the old stadium in the hole we used to have up there. And somebody came in and said, "Coach, you'll never guess what?" And I said, what's going on? You know, what are you talking about? They said, "The game's a sellout. They're scalping tickets out on Annie Glidden." And I thought, oh my God, a sellout? We're on national Fox television. Maryland's ranked 12th or 14th, whatever the heck they were in the country. And then I walked out there in pregame, Mike, and this was when Under Armour was just starting up. And the Under Armour, the guy that ran Under Armour, owned it, was a Maryland grad. So they were all out there in their Under Armour outfits, these tight shirts. And Mike, it was one of the best looking football teams I've ever seen. They're walking around cocky, and I'm going, I went back in the locker room and got sick. I mean, I really did. I said, well, 3 out of 4 isn't bad, you know. And they go out there, and I'll never forget this. They take the ball to start the game, and they drive, if you remember, right
Yes.
down the field
Yep.
and score about 7 plays. And I thought to myself on the sideline, well, I had the 4 things I wanted. Well, 3 out of 4 isn't bad. And we come back and, of course, have a chance to win the game in regulation and got a field goal blocked. They had a kid that just made a tremendous effort, leaped as high as I've ever seen anybody leap, blocked the kick. And I thought, boy, if a chance for our kids to go down the tubes, that would be it. But we didn't. Came back. Danny Sheldon made the great catch for the touchdown. And the thing I remember, Mike, 2 things, and you've probably heard this before too. The last play, I couldn't see it because it was way across the field from our bench. It was down in the corner in the end zone. I didn't know what happened. All of a sudden, everybody's running out in the field, and I didn't know why. And I thought, well, heck, I might as well go join them too. And then I found out later that the ball got kicked and we intercepted it.
Yeah.
And I remember going up to Carrie Groth after the game. God bless her. And she gave me a big hug, and I said, Carrie, I quit. And you've heard this before. She looked at me. She said, what? I said, Carrie, that was my dream. And I said, all 4 of them came through. I said, what else? And I remember she pushed back and she said, we got Alabama in 2 weeks. And she was laughing. I said, okay, I'll stay.
And then you made a demonstration, and again, I've known you since 1980, and rightfully so, but there you are, and I was kind of stunned because I didn't know what happened either on the last play on the interception. But there you are. But I understood that, you know, the 23-game losing streak and all the tough losses at Vandy and Auburn, and it wasn't just you, it was the kids. You felt for the kids, and so it was kind of unlike you, but it was cool. It sounds idiotic. It was cool.
My coaching, and I don't want to belabor this point, but my coaching's a tough profession. And we came in there, like you said, and we suffered for a while. We worked, and we had kids come in here and commit themselves. And I can't tell you the number of emails, a few phone calls, a few people yelling at alumni events, things I hate to repeat to anybody. And that was a relief. I mean, that validated what we were doing and how we were doing. Now, maybe we could have done it a quicker way, but it wouldn't. One of the things I wanted to do here, because this was my last job, Mike. I knew, you know, I didn't get this job till I was 51. And it took us 4 or 5 years just to get the thing righted, you know. Right. So I was in my late 50s when we started having some fun and success, and I wasn't going anywhere else. I wanted to build a foundation here so this thing could continue. I wanted us to be good, but I wanted Northern to be good 20 years later.
Well, this goes back to what you were talking about, Bill, doing things the right way. Exactly. And this is how you started. Hey, we're going to have integrity and do it the right way and not bring in JC kids or whatever. Well, while we're talking about Maryland, let's talk about the memories of Alabama. I mean, I can still remember being on the field, the pregame, and the cheerleaders come out with the 12 national championship flags. And we're not in the Mid-American today. We're at Alabama. So, you know, the post game, you know, where John Peters said the kids didn't really realize the significance.
He was right. You know, I remember when Kerry came to me and said, you know, we got a chance to play Alabama. And of course, my first reaction as a coach was, whoa, whoa, you know, because we already had Maryland on there. And she said, you know, it's a once in a lifetime chance. It's, you know, da-da-da-da. And, you know, I'm a football coach, and getting a chance to play at Alabama, that's a thrill. I said, all right, let's go. We don't ever know if we'll get this chance again. And we got the game. We went down there. I remember Friday night, Mike, and you like you said, I looked up, and the kids were kind of loosening up on their own, and I was just standing around admiring the stadium and the whole picture, and there was 12 banners. And I said, well, they got a flag up there, 2 flags for each national championship. I thought, you know, 6 of them. No, it was 12. You know, and I counted them, and I know you mentioned this earlier, but I envisioned Bear Bryant leaning against the goalpost with his hat on, you know, sitting down there, and, you know, I said, wow, this is really special. And then to turn around and win that football game, and our kids played a great football game.
Sure
we did everything. We played defense, we played offense, we kicking game. We blocked a punt. We had to
And
block
got a 2-point.
extra, and that was the ball game.
Yeah.
That was a
Yeah.
3-point swing.
Yes.
One they didn't get, and two we got. So
Yep.
that was the ball. So I mean, every phase of that game, our kids played, and they played a great game, and we won. And like you said, we go in the locker room, and of course, after every win, we'd sing the fight song. So the kids sang the fight song and got done, started the shower. And I'm ready to party, you know, whatever. That's when John Peters was standing next to me, and he said, I don't think these kids understand what they did. And that was just, they expected it. I can remember, and this goes back to Maryland too. I remember a talk I gave before the game, and I told them, we can beat Maryland. A little stronger language, but we can beat Maryland. And I was trying to convince them that we can play with this team. And doggone, we did. And after that, those kids, they weren't shocked they beat Alabama. They knew, they weren't supposed to, but they weren't shocked that they beat them. And they went about their business and went on and went from there.
But you could tell there was a progression, at the end of 2002 when we knocked off Bowling Green. I mean, that was, so we knew going into 2003 that, hey, this is going to be a good year.
Our kids believe. And, people have asked me sometimes, and I know I've spoken at the national convention after I retired, about building a program. And one of the things, and this is something that I learned way back from Bo Schembechler, from Bill Mallory, every place I coached, even in high school, we did the same thing, was getting a commitment from the kids. And when we came in here, the first January, our winter program was tough, Mike. It was 6 in the morning in the rec building. And these kids had to walk from the dorm to the rec building at 5:30 in the morning in January. And you know what I'm talking about. The wind's blowing. There's
Tropical
18
decal.
inches of snow. I was driving in and I could hardly make it. And it was tough, and it was a commitment. And we lost a lot of kids those first couple of years. Kids didn't want to do that. But when you have that commitment, when the going gets tough, it's hard to quit, because you've put too much into something. If you don't make that commitment to start with and things get tough, you say the heck with it. You just give up on it. These kids weren't like, they were, that in the summertime we had a real strong program the kids committed to. And like you said, when they got to the point in Alabama's and Maryland's, they were confident. They weren't shocked that they were successful.
No, you're right. Those who will stay will be champions. How did the right way become the hard way? Weren't you still coaching? And I think that was part of the post-game celebration. And I understand the hard way was, okay, we're going to outwork people. We may not have 12 NFL prospects. I mean, we have 2 or 3, but we're going to outwork you. So how did that morph into?
I can't give you an honest answer. It didn't come from me. It came from our players. One of our players, and I got a couple ideas, but I'm not even sure who it was, but these kids would do these things after practice and chants, and all of a sudden I'm hearing the hard way. And I'm going, I don't know where it came, but it was the players that brought that up.
Okay.
And I think it was part of that thing I just mentioned to you. They
Right.
know how hard they had worked.
Their work ethic.
And the other thing we preached a lot, Mike, and I don't want to belabor this, but when we got here, our facilities were not very good.
Oh, you're right.
They could rank right near the bottom. And there were high schools in this area that had better facilities. And we used that, to be honest with you. I told our players, we're not pretty. We don't have this. We don't have that. While it's snowing and raining and all these things out here, we're outside practicing in it. Central Michigan's up in their indoor facility and da-da-da-da-da. So we used that thing. And I think it really caught on with our kids. And I know I came back a couple of years ago, and one of the players, they looked at that new indoor, and a couple of them just shook their head and said, Coach, because they remember us talking about how we didn't have those things. But doggone it, that wasn't going to keep us from doing our thing. And there was an old Woody Hayes line that I used, and the kids got tired of me saying it all the time. But if you fight in the North Atlantic, you train in the North Atlantic. So that's what I would tell them. And of course, now they come back, as I see them years later, they say the same thing, Coach, if they're still fighting in the North Atlantic or training there. But the idea was, if that's where you're going to compete, that's what, if you're going to play in the snow and rain, you practice in it. And like I said, now they don't have to, and that's good.
Well, a lot of people didn't know that, you had 2 jobs there, head coach and fundraiser. and you were traveling all over the place and trying to get that building going, and thank goodness, and now we have some nice facilities. So,
Mike, I'm proud of what we did football-wise, but I'm really also proud of the facilities that we were able to get built with a lot of help, starting with Kerry Groth. I mean, Kerry was the one that really got that thing off the ground. We can talk more about that later if you want, and then Jim Phillips helped finish it off. But those things were imperative. I mentioned before, this job could be wonderful, could be a great job if the commitment was there to get it done. And look what we got going now. We got facilities that are as good as any. I just drove by the indoor coming in here today, and what a beautiful thing it is now.
You're right. You're right.
And I told Rod this when he came. I said, you're losing some excuses now. You got things there for you to recruit to and to use and tools. And of course, he's done a great job, and they have been successful. But that was imperative that we got that done, and we did a great job with it.
This is a good time to bring up Kerry. I mean, she hired you and supported you through that tough time. What do you want to say, reflecting back?
It's hard for me not to get choked up when I talk about Bill Mallory or Kerry Groth, to be honest with you. And Kerry's football knowledge wasn't great. I think she'd probably tell you that. But what a great people person she was. And she gave me a chance, Mike. I wanted to be a head coach badly. And she saw something. I don't know what it was, but she gave me a chance. And then when we started out so badly, there were a lot of people, because they communicated this to me, that they wanted me out of here. And I understand. That's coaching. And we weren't I understand that. But she saw something. She stayed with it. John Lauderette, who I loved to death, he was the president here at the time. And John wasn't a big sports guy. And I don't mean that to be critical, but he wasn't. A great man. I love him. And he relied on Kerry an awful lot. And Kerry would tell, because he would get questions from people on the outside too. And Kerry would say, John, he's doing it the right way. He'll be all right. And I think at times she had a wonder too, but she was wonderful to me. I understood when we came here that we were not going to have everything we wanted. You weren't going to have that in the Mid. Like I said, I'd been around the Mid-American Conference. I understood that. But there were some things that we should and when we needed, and she did everything she could to provide those for us. And I was just so happy that we got things turned around for her too, because she was really a tremendous supporter of me. And like I said, I love her to death.
No, and there was a lot of pressure on her being a female AD. Yeah. And, well, wait a minute, football is your main sport or whatever. So, yeah, it worked out. It worked out right. Okay, I guess in football there's wins and losses. And I have to ask, because I've thought about it, the bowl snub in 03 and maybe the last 30 seconds of the Akron game in 05 in the MAC championship.
You had to bring those up, huh?
Do you sometimes get up in the middle of the night and go, oh my God,
I'm old enough now I don't get up in the middle of the night, but I think about it during the day a lot. You never forget those, Mike. I remember Alabama, I remember Maryland, but I also remember those tough times too. And you never can replay them. Those were hard. They were really hard. And at the end of my career, one of the things I think that really drove me to retirement was it gotten to the point where winning was fun, but not as much fun as it used to be. And losing was even worse. And I just, I'd been in some tough jobs in my coaching career. Like I said, Indiana was a tough job when I went in there. Illinois, when I went down there, was a tough job. And I'd done my share of losing too. It just got to the point where, it was just harder and harder, and there wasn't as much joy with the wins. And, it was time. But you never forget those. You never forget them.
Do you still remember the controversy that we created when Northwestern was 6-6, and you said, "Oh, they don't deserve to go," and it was pre-game Eastern Michigan, and the clock had turned, so it was dark, and we went up to your office. So there might have been 4 or 5 of us in there, in your giant office, the old one. and somebody asks you, well, you think you can get a 10th win? And well, Eastern Michigan's improved. You played the game, and oh, you know, then if you get 10 wins, do you think you can go to a bowl? And he says, well, I'd like to, but you know, we're not sure. And of course, we had lost the 2 games in our division, and the guy from the Daily Herald was a Northwestern grad. And when you said what you said about Northwestern, and I'm a big Northwestern guy. Great school, Jim Phillips, you know, deal, but this guy's eyes bugged out of his head, and I knew he was going to jump on it, and he was not very objective, very objective.
If I had a stage, I'd say it again, Mike. Those kids deserved a bowl game.
Yes, they did. Yes, they did.
And you can give me all these ups and downs and all these, but those kids deserved to go to a bowl game, and that was wrong.
No, you're right. And, you know, and you've been in the Big Ten too, so. Okay, crazy story. And you told me this, and it wasn't until I saw the 2 kids, Michael Turner and Garrett Wolf. Their body masses are a little different. If you had a 100-yard race, who would win?
Be a pretty good race.
Back then.
You know, I have to guess a little bit. I would think probably Mike Turner. Mike was in the finals in the state track meet in the 100-yard dash. Garrett had more wiggle, make you miss. Michael didn't make you miss. He ran through you. You knew that. But Michael was fast. People didn't realize how fast he was at that side. Now, he was a straight liner. He wasn't a guy with a lot of wiggle. But he was fast. It'd be a heck of a race. I think maybe Mike might win it.
Do you see the comment about the Ohio State linebacker with Janatis? How do you pronounce it? It was on ESPN, and he said, you know, we had a kid from Northern Illinois that just ran all over us, this little Garrett Wolf, and a little smile. He had a great game against Ohio State.
And Michigan.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a question. Now, he's too small. He can't do it against. Well, he did it against those people too. Garrett Wolf, in my opinion, was one of the best, if not the best, pure football player that I've been around. He and Ross Brown are probably the 2. I mean, natural. Mike Turner was a great talent, but Garrett was a natural. I mean, everything came easy to Garrett. He'd catch it, he'd carry it, he'd make you miss. He was tough. I mean, he was just a natural football player.
Joe, we were talking about Michael Turner and Garrett Wolf, 2 of the bigger name players, and you had certainly many of them. You also utilized a lot of walk-ons. How and why? I mean, that was kind of the secret. And I don't know if you want to name 3 or 4 kids that were prominent.
You know, it starts back to 1980 when Bill Mallory said this was a great job because you got Chicago right there. There's a lot of people, a lot of players in there. And some of them get overlooked, and they're in your backyard. And our staff, our young coaches, our assistant coaches, and Scott Schaefer in particular. Scott recruited the south side of Chicago. And Scott would go in all those schools and find some hidden gems that were recruited by nobody and get them to come out here as walk-ons. And a lot of them turned out to be really good players. Larry Williams, Brian Atkinson, Randy Drew from Milwaukee, Chris Finland from up in Rockford was a great player. Wow. Jake Verstrady was a walk-on. Travis Moore. And I'm forgetting an awful lot of them, Mike. But we got probably 10 or 12 kids like that every year to walk on. And a lot of them turned out to not just be players, but really, really good players. And that was one of the advantages we had here, because we could spend a lot of time in Chicago. We could find those kids. Other people had to come in and go back out, and they didn't have the time to dig because they were far away. Again, one of the reasons why this was potentially a great job. And our coaches did a great job of finding them. Like I said, Scott in particular down on the south side did a great job. And Larry Williams was a great story. He came in here, we had him out, and we didn't have a scholarship for him. I was used up. I was filled up. I didn't have any. We had Larry out, and Scott really liked him. So he's a player. And his coach, Glenn Johnson, Dunbar High School, just loved Larry. And Glenn was an old tough guy. If he said the guy was good, he was good. And Glenn really pushed him, and I had him out. And I sat him down, and I really liked the kid. And I remember sitting up in a presidential suite in the student union, because that's where we used to have our final talks with the players before they left. And I said, Larry, I don't have a scholarship for you, but I'd really like to have you be a part of our program. He says, Coach, I deserve a scholarship. And I said, Larry, I'm not arguing with you. I'm limited. I don't have them. He said, Coach, I'll earn one right away. And he did. And was a great player for us. And we had others. I'll guarantee you. We had Chad Spann when we recruited him out of Indianapolis. I promised his mother the same situation. I was out of scholarships. But I said, I really think he can be a player in our program. And I promised him, I said, Chad, as soon as you show yourself, I said, I got one, you'll have it. He got it during 2-a-days his freshman year. We had a kid leave the program. I gave him the scholarship. And Chad was a pretty good running back here for a few years.
Yes, he was. We're going to skip back to, I guess, between preseason Maryland and the Bowling Green game when ESPN and Game Day showed up and Lee Corso.
Keep bringing these things up.
Well, you know, I mean, just trying to. So there's an 8-week, maybe an 8-week stretch there where, you know, I always tested your patience, but hey, Joe, we got another interview. Hey, you know, and there were people calling me. Obviously, that was my job, but there were people calling you direct. You probably had a third of the interviews that I didn't even know about. I think Rick Cerrone got you on WFAN in New York, but I mean, and I said, Joe, we okay with all this? Because you were doing things at 7 a.m. in the morning and then 10 o'clock at night. But you said, hey, Mike, we're hot. Let's keep doing it. Did you have fun doing those interviews?
Yeah, I did. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the press, Mike. I enjoyed my relationship with guys like Bill Jouse.
I miss them.
I do too. And I love those guys. I mean, they were legends in their own right, you know, and such polite people. And I really enjoyed those guys. Joe Goddard. Loved him and all those guys. And I loved work as long as they were fair with us. And like you said, and you sold me on this, and you were 100% right. We needed that. Northern needed that. And we became a national brand there off of that. And God, after that, when I would go to a convention or I'd go somewhere, I mean, people, I won't say stood at attention, but they know who the heck we were. Yeah. And we needed all that we can get. And I did. I enjoyed it. You know, I'd rather have it that way than nobody calling, Mike.
Was there any bizarre people that, you know, had no clue or? Oh,
there's always a few. I can't remember.
I think most of them were, some of them were from New York. And do you have electricity in DeKalb? You know, some of those big timers, but I digress. Okay, your last year was kind of tough. You had a lot of close losses, but you refused to break a lot of red shirts, including Chandler Harnish. Were you kind of saying, you know what, I'm looking long term instead of short term?
Yeah, we got pretty beat up there early in the year. And I think it was kind of obvious that we were going to struggle. We lost our quarterback then. And Chad Morris had to come in and play. God bless him. But I saw Chandler sitting there. And Chandler probably wasn't ready to play. He was probably better and we might have won a couple of games. But I honestly didn't want to waste a year for the kid. He needed another year to prepare. I watched him play his 5th year when he had just a fantastic year. It was the right thing to do for this program and for that kid. And I don't regret that at all. Like I said, we might have won a couple more games maybe. But like I said, that wasn't a hard choice, Mike. Like I said, that was the right thing for this program and it was the right thing for that kid. And like I said, I enjoyed watching him play his 5th year.
I don't disagree, but a lot of fans, they're looking at his 5th year going, wow, if he would have played that in 2007 that way, well, no, he's a true freshman.
Yeah.
So, good kid. See, you just got married.
Yeah, I did.
John McDougal, a Hall of Fame basketball coach, and you and he are kind of similar. He always would say patience is a virtue. Now maybe he was talking about running his offense or whatever, but I kind of look at it as a long-term thing because many of your accomplishments and achievements came late in your career. And so, you know, you were a Division I assistant for 22 years. Yeah, you won a state championship at Warren Reserve, but it's just like, I think you made the Mentor Hall of Fame in '99, and then ours, and then Miami's, the Cradle of Coaches. You coached in an all-star game late in your career. I mean, is patience a virtue?
Well, it's interesting because John McDougal, if I'm correct, his career kind of started later too. He came here at an advanced age, like myself.
Yeah.
So I think you get that as you get older in the coaching profession. But I think that's certainly true. And I admired John. I did. When we were here, he was coaching basketball, and I loved to watch his teams play. He was a great coach. He and Bill were a lot alike.
Yes.
And they liked each other very much.
Yes.
But, it's hard to be patient sometimes, right? It's hard. And like I said, my situation was a little, if I was 32 when I got this job, I'm not sure I'd have handled it near as well. Not because of experience, but because I wouldn't have been as patient. As I told you, when I got this job, I figured I was hoping to stay here long enough to retire. It was going to be my shot at being a head coach. I wasn't probably going to get another one. So I wasn't anxious to win and bolt because I didn't think that was going to happen. And I wanted to build a foundation. Like I said, I wanted to see this thing reach its potential. And like I said, I take a lot of pride now, Mike, in seeing this program still going on. I'd like to think that maybe that part of the reason it's successful now is because of the way it was built way back when.
Another thing that you emphasize, and Bill did too, similarities, but the coaches' wives, how much support and how vital they are to the program is that you're spending more time with someone else's children than your own. Talk about Carol and all the wives.
I couldn't be a coach's wife. I mean, it's a hard job, and I was blessed. I've seen guys get out of coaching because their wives couldn't deal with it. I was very fortunate. Carol knew when we first met and got married that I wanted to coach. I don't think she realized completely what she was getting into, but she was a gem. And, every time I picked up and moved, she was right there with us, and she's the one that raised the boys. And there was a lot of time, Mike, away from home. And you mentioned it, from August until February when the recruiting ends, it's 7 days a week. It's 12, and I'm not exaggerating, 12 to 16-hour days sometimes. And then the last 5 years, I was, like you said, I was on the road trying to raise money too on top of that. And she was a princess, like most of them are, that deal with that. In our retirement years, I'm trying to pay her back. We're doing a lot of traveling, going to places she wants to do and things she wants to do because she deserves that. But like I said, to be a coach's wife, as I mentioned, I don't think I could do what she did. And they were a big part of our recruiting too. I mean, we used to have the parents out to our houses after dinner Saturday night. And I can remember we lived out in Fairway Oaks, and that big NIU bus about 7:30 on Saturday night would coming down the street, and the neighbors would wonder what the heck's going on at Novak's. But we'd have the parents out there, and she did a great job of entertaining. And when you're recruiting, and they always say this, the mom in recruiting is important. And when you're recruiting a youngster, that mother better be on your side. And those mothers gravitate to the coaches' wives because they can talk mom talk with them. And a lot of times those coaches, and they're not just Carol, but our other coaches' wives too, did a great job of sitting with those ladies and expressing to them how we did stuff and how important they would be and how we would take care of them. And like I said, it takes a special person, and Carol was an integral part of the success we had as coaches.
Well, if you want to talk about it, where are some of the places that you and Carol have gone?
Mike, we've taken a big trip every year except last year. Carol had surgery, so we only took one trip, or no trips last year, so we're taking 2 this year. But we've been to France, we've been to Italy, we've been to Spain, we've been on a Danube River cruise, Australia, New Zealand. We just came back from Switzerland a couple of weeks ago. Been to Scotland and England, and Greek Isle cruise. I mean, we've done all the touristy things, Mike, and loved them all. As people say, what's the best trip? They've all been wonderful. We're going to the Croatian coast here in September, start in Venice, get on a boat and do the Croatian coast and end up back in Venice, and want to do Ireland yet and haven't done Alaska yet. So there's a lot to see out there, and I love traveling. So does Carol. seeing different things and seeing different cultures, and it's one of the reasons I retired. I loved coaching, but I did have a few other things I wanted to accomplish, and knock on wood, we've been healthy and lucky enough to be able to do that.
Well, you have a little time to do a lot of reading, which you didn't have before.
A lot of reading, Mike. I've read I think the first book I read after I retired was Michener's Hawaii.
Which is about that thick.
I'd always looked at that book, and I love Hawaii. And I said, I want to read that, so I could never do it. And when I retired, it was one of the first books I picked up, and I loved it. It was a great book.
2018 will be your 11th year, I believe, in retirement.
Yes.
Do you miss coaching? Or what aspect of it do you miss?
You know, it's gotten to the point now, Mike, I'm perfectly adjusted from it. I miss the kids. You know, the relationships. I mean, that may sound corny, but that's what it was about. I always thought I was a teacher. That's what I was raised to be. I was influenced by my teachers, and when I was in school, my teachers and coaches, and I wanted to be a teacher. I would have been happy, honestly, being a teacher and a coach in Warren, Ohio. That was what I thought I was going to do. I got the opportunity then to go to Miami and da-da-da-da. But I was going to be a high school teacher and coach in northeastern Ohio, and I'd have been perfectly happy. But I miss the kids, the relationships. I don't miss the internet stuff that's going on now, the social media stuff that goes on now. The game's changed, Mike. It's so much more about money. The television part of it, which is important, and I watch it and love it, but it's dominating the game too much. You know, tells you when you play, who you play, where you play. There's some parts of that I'm afraid are getting a little out of control, and I hope they don't bring down the game. But like I said, I love my time at it, but there's a lot of that stuff I don't. I don't miss the fundraising. That was not fun for me. I did it because I wanted to see those facilities built, right. But I can never say that I was not a fundraiser that I enjoyed.
Your stance, I mean, now, 11 years ago, when you were still active in the American Football Coaches Association, would you be a radical by saying some of the changes here, you know, you see what I'm saying?
Well, I think we need to make some changes. I think giving the kids a little bit of money is important. I felt people don't always realize. I've gone in a lot of homes. I've seen where a lot of these kids come from. Some of them come from very well-to-do situations. Some don't. And it's easy enough to say, well, he's got a full scholarship, he's in the middle of campus, but if they don't have a cent in their pocket to get a pizza or a hamburger, you know, I was lucky when I went to school. I always had a few bucks in my pocket. If I got depressed, I'd go out and buy a new shirt. You know, I'd go out and get a Bang Burger out at the wagon at night. Some of these kids, they don't have that extra money. Right. And back when I played, we weren't making the kind of money either now that because of television. What's the Big Ten give out? Almost
50 million a year.
Yeah, to a school. That's just that.
That's twice our athletic budget.
I know Ohio State, a home game at Ohio State's worth almost $10 million. I mean, it's out of sight, and these kids should share in that. We need to do something with safety, Mike. It's a tough game, and there's obviously effects from it. I'm concerned that down the road this game could have problems with the safety issue. If I was a parent nowadays, I'd be a little skeptical. I love football, and I think it's a great teacher, and it's wonderful. But we need to take it. You know, somebody said if you want to make it safer, take the face mask off. Now, that's radical, and I don't think that's going to happen. But they're right, because the helmet now has become a weapon. The kids have no fear. Back when I remember playing, Mike, with no face mask. I remember when I first started in junior high, I did not have a face mask. I never put my nose in there, I'll tell you that. It was all shoulder. And that's the way we were taught, and that's the way you played. Nowadays, these kids are fearless with that headgear. And, you know, there's some serious things that we need to. I think we've cut down on contact a lot in practice, spring, during the season. That's great. But I think we need to continue to keep looking at those things because I think it's a real serious thing.
Last question. How do you watch a football game? I mean, you're a coach. Oh, look what technique they're doing. Or you have a friend on the coaching staff and you know what they run. I mean, Can you divorce yourself? I cannot. I'll be watching a game, somebody gets an interception, and Bud taught me this, his back foot, that's where the interception starts. Because in the old days when I started, there was no replay, and you had to write it down or memorize it. It was the 22-yard line. And so I can't turn it off sometimes. Do you turn it off and just watch football for the pageantry and the joy and the whatever?
I think the farther I'm away from it, I do a little bit more, Mike, yeah. I think when I first started, I was very critical, but I could do that in my living room, and I wasn't embarrassed about it. I was home alone, but I think now it's gotten to the point where I just enjoy more of the pageantry, the game. I love college football. I don't care if I ever watch an NFL game in my life, Mike, to be honest with you. And I don't. I very seldom do. It's just, to me, it's sterile. Everybody runs the same offense, same defense, and they're so good. I guess maybe that's, but college, you got the campus, you got the pageantry. I mean, Mike, I watch from 9 in the morning when game day starts until after midnight I'm watching football. And I'm taping a whole bunch of games. And then on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I'm watching more football. Even though I know what the score is, I mean, I just love to watch college football. In the campus scene and the whole thing, like I said, I love it.
Well, good. Well, Joe, this has been a real pleasure, and before we close, I just want to say that working with you all these years has been a distinct pleasure, and you're a class act, and your players and staff, and it's been great.
Mike, thank you. I appreciate it.
I'd just like to chime in and just thank you, Joe, for bringing the amount of class that you have to this program. I remember listening to your interviews at the end, when you were losing 20 games in a row, listening to your interviews on radio, and just thinking, how you're owning it, how you're not making excuses, and when you turned that program around, like a lot of people, we were not surprised. So thank you for everything you brought to this program.
If I could just say one more thing, and this was true at Indiana and it was true here. Part of the joy we got, I know Bill was the same way as coaches, was watching how people like you and Brad Hoy and Bill Finucane and Jerry Smith, people that are lifers, enjoyed the time we had and what's going on now. And it was the same way when Indiana, when we got things going down there. We had the Kit Klingelhoffers, and the people that were lifers there had never experienced that and the fun we had.
No, it is amazing. Our kids, our students in our office, and Steve Nemeth, my assistant, he'd walk in with Illini shirts and Notre Dame shirts, and he's an Iowa guy. And I mean, he's a good Northern Illinois man, and so all of a sudden you turn it around, we start winning, and here come the kids wearing Northern stuff, and the whole community. And I didn't get into that, maybe I should have, but it's like, no, that's part of the deal, the pride, and hey, you want your alma mater to do well, and you did that. Your kids did that.
Our players are doing very well now too, as husbands and fathers. A lot of them are in the Chicago area. I follow them, and I'm proud of what those kids have become.
No, they're good kids.
Okay.
All right, that's a wrap, as they say. Thank you.
I hope it was good.